The Institute for Faith and Freedom at Grove City College presents Liberty Mail with the Student Fellows of Faith and Freedom.
Welcome back to Liberty Mail. This is Libby Krieger.
And Aaron Jenks.
And we're coming to you from the underground studio here at Grove City College with the Institute for Faith and Freedom. Finally back to a normal episode. We had Grace on last week. Hope you guys enjoyed that episode. And it is St. Patrick's Day today, so happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone out there listening. So just to jump into our first win, we have the Senate passing a resolution to end mask mandates on public transportation. So Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky introduced it, and it passed 57-40 with 8 Democrats joining in. So I think that's a win in itself, not only the content of the bill to obviously, it has to pass through Congress first, the House, but this is showing that people are done with the mask mandates, especially on transportation, because other areas have already been reeled back, but transportation is one of the last ones that is still in place. And seeing that it is bipartisan, too, is, I think, a win.
Yeah, 8 Democrats voting with it, and then 1 Republican voting against it, Senator Romney. And then I think this was in the face of that the TSA extended the mask mandate a month longer than was needed, so this required action on legislation side. So we appreciate the initiative from Senator Rand Paul, and then a slew of other Republicans and even Democrats, which is good for working across the aisle right now.
Definitely. And I think it's showing, too, an indication that Americans more broadly than just Republicans are kind of done with this mask mandate stuff. So also looking as what Mitt Romney's motivation was for voting no, I think was interesting. He said public health professionals should make these decisions, not the politicians. Obviously, I would probably disagree with that because you're just giving more power to the bureaucracy, and we've seen this going on for about 2 years now because you're only giving the say to public health professionals, but public health is more than just quote-unquote the science. You have to consider all the factors of what it means to be public, so that's policy as well.
Yeah, I mean, public health professionals should definitely inform senators or any elected official, but
they aren't elected.
That's my point.
And they aren't representative of the people.
So they should not be making the rules or at least passing guidelines for that will be into law. So I don't know. Romney is definitely interesting in his political decisions as he sways back and forth. But I almost think what public backlash on this will be or support, because there's definitely a psychological aspect of masking right now. It's even though in certain areas you have really low numbers and under 100, under 50, but you still have people that are comfortable with masks and they it almost feels like a protection to them. And so there's definitely a psychological aspect that I think people are going to freak out, no, we want masking on I
think people
airplanes.
In cities will, in places like that.
I still think we're going to see masking for a long time in our lifetime.
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible, but I think at this point it's almost become such a virtue signaling thing that there's not a ton of evidence that masks really do all that much. So I think now I've even seen meme accounts and stuff like that making jokes about how people in D.C. are wearing masks just to show that they're not Republicans and stuff like that. So I think that's almost more of what masking has become. It's showing your cards on which side of the aisle you are. And obviously this was a bipartisan vote, so that's great. But I'd also like to read some of these quotes from Rand Paul, which I thought were really spot on. He said, "Today, the Senate said enough is enough and sent a message to the unelected government bureaucrats to stop the anti-science nanny state requirement of travel mask mandates. Since March 2020, unelected bureaucrats have incessantly declared that we should follow the science, but the same bureaucrats continue to defy science by imposing an ineffective and restrictive mask mandate for individuals traveling on public transit in airplanes." So I thought that was all spot on, saying these bureaucrats are not even following the science exactly. It's just kind of a power trip at this point. So I thought this is a good win for conservatism and just America right now.
Yeah, I think it's a boost to morale for a lot of people, at least, that, okay, this is a sign, one more sign that we're moving away from COVID in America. We're moving away from this pandemic that we just struggled through for 3 years. So good for the Senate for doing this, and now it has to just go through the House, and this will be signed into law and go against this.
The veto correct. So we'll see. But at
We'll
least
see,
it's a good signal.
Yeah,
I
and
think,
hopefully
from
it'll
the
go
Senate.
against. And then even if not, we have only a month more extension on the TSA mask mandate. So if you're flying soon, good news in the upcoming summer. Go to anywhere you want without wearing a mask.
Yeah, exactly. I just realized all of our wins are about COVID today, too. So I hope you guys are interested in talking about COVID still, because it is still very much so in the news. But they're all wins, so that's great. So the next win that we have today is that in New York there was an audit of former Governor Cuomo's handling of COVID. And so there was a lot of controversy surrounding the reporting of the nursing home deaths and all of that, and saying that it was underreported. So they actually did an audit, and they found that as of February 3rd, 2021, the administration's internal data reported 13,147 nursing home resident deaths, but publicly only 9,076 deaths were reported, meaning over 30% of deaths were not made public. And they found more broadly that they underreported the death toll in total by up to about 50%. And seeing that the information was correct internally, just not reported accurately to the public, I think that's a huge issue. But the win is that they had an audit and that it is being brought to light, and hopefully there will be some sort of accountability for this.
Anyone from New York has seen this coming for a very long time, since it even got reported that we were like, this is a tragedy happening in our own state. And it kind of just made sense, but for so long, if you were a resident of New York and you said this in public circles, you were like,
how dare you
yeah,
question
how dare you against what they're saying, and like it's not true. It's not true.
It's science. It's
and
public
you're
health.
spewing disinformation just to hurt a candidate.
Yeah.
And so now to see it all come to light, it's saddening, but it's also sobering, because we can't be censoring any information right now when we talk about, I want to criticize this politician. No, we have to censor you.
Mm-hmm.
You
Question the regime, you get censored.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what's so interesting, like you said, is it was like misinformation back a few months ago. And like we've said before, misinformation 6 months later is truth. So it is really interesting. And I think the ramifications of how incorrect this was reported to the public are pretty broad. I think one big one is that it probably pushed other states to follow policy decisions of Cuomo in New York, because their numbers weren't showing as high. So they're saying all of these really restrictive, draconian lockdowns and all these mandates are working so well because look at our numbers. But they knew they were lying to the public and misleading maybe other states, because, whenever we do have a system of federalism, other states can look to policy decisions of different states and see how well they're going and then follow in their footsteps. And so I'm wondering what kind of impact that could have had. Maybe something that we'll never know, but just to look back and say what could have happened differently if we would have had the numbers reported correctly.
Yeah, well, Governor Andrew Cuomo was definitely a leader within the whole movement, and there was a while where people were pushing his name for even like a presidential run. But specifically for this article, it's just pertaining to the nursing homes, and I know he did do a well job from an administration point in New York. At least I thought as
a New Yorker.
As our county, and you still were able to do stuff. It wasn't as draconian as Michigan became or California. There was a period of a 6 month where it was really bad. Those were the first 6 months where they told you the truth and they were like, oh, we're only going to be here for 6 months, but then 2 years extend. My point being, when we see this, I really want to harp on, Cuomo is thinking about running again in New York, so I really hope this hurts him because...
He's thinking about running again?
Yeah, he's running as an independent, most likely. Oh, wow. And so I think New Yorkers are not going to be very forgiving about, even though, first of all, they're not forgiving about the nursing deaths that it took place, and now that the numbers are 30% higher than they're supposed to be, and that, we'll maybe get to some evidence that people were hiding or suppressing numbers, or what's the cause behind these numbers being so low?
Well, yeah, they had the internal data correct. So it was an intentional decision not to give the public the right information. I don't know what the motivation was behind that, but they had all the right information. They just didn't put it out there. So however sinister you want to take that, that's up to you. But that is pretty concerning for an administration to be under reporting 30% to 50% of deaths.
Yeah, it makes me question another kind of theme of the COVID in the hospitals is like, okay, how many deaths of these were actually COVID?
Yeah, actually COVID, or someone who had COVID and wasn't
And
killed
that
by
is,
COVID.
and that is not just conspiracy. In the mere fact of stating that, okay, we're questioning these numbers and we're questioning how the authority behind them, because look at this, 30% a markup, and okay,
You're
just
starting
give
to
us
sound like a
validity.
conspiracy theorist over here, Aaron. I mean,
Very much so.
misinformation sounds like. But also, New Yorkers were probably making decisions for their loved ones, putting them in nursing homes or however to deal with their elderly loved ones based off of the numbers too. I mean, that's something that could have been informing them in incorrect information. That's hard to make a decision off of that or make the correct decision.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was just a long line of lawsuits waiting at his doorstep, Andrew Cuomo's doorstep.
Yeah, definitely. But either way, I think this is a win because we're seeing some sort of transparency and accountability. So I have a quote here from the state comptroller, who's the one who conducted the audit, last name DiNapoli, I believe. He
Sounds
said,
good.
"Our audit findings are extremely troubling. The public was misled by those at the highest level of state government through distortion and suppression of the facts when New Yorkers deserve the truth." And I think that's spot on. So another quote, rather than providing accurate and reliable information during a public health emergency, the department instead conformed its presentation to the executive's narrative, often presenting data in a manner that misled the public. It's interesting that he said in the executive's narrative. So I think it does show that a lot of this is rooted from Cuomo and his administration. So glad to see there's some accountability and transparency with this.
Well, I think there's two reasons I think why it's the executive narrative. One, because he took such a powerful lead to combat COVID in New York, and then two, it kind of I kind of believe the pandemic and where we were and our ability to assess it, we needed kind of that executive action, and the legislation or not legislation, the why am I blanking?
The executive what?
The Senate and the House. I'm blanking on just the branch in my brain
Legislative?
right now. Yeah, sorry.
It's an early morning.
I didn't think they had the kind of. It didn't seem like they had the process or the ability to take lead in a public pandemic. And if you have anything to say, this leads into exactly to the third win of the week, I think.
Yeah, go for it.
And it's the Senate Health Committee voted overwhelmingly to pass legislation to improve the country's preparedness for a future public health crisis. And so this is establishing whether it's a hierarchy of leadership within the CDC, and it's giving structure to, okay, how do we handle future public health crisis so we don't have to lean on the executive branch so much, or we don't have to lead on Governor Cuomo or any other governor to Governor Michigan to take control and kind of implement what they think is most important. So we have a good process that's going to pass through, whether it's the CDC or they have to come back and give reports to the Senate every, what is it?
Every so often. I think
it's every 4 years or 1 year.
I saw how they require the Senate confirmation of the CDC director and establishes specific functions of that director. I think that is a good move because Rochelle Walensky, I believe, is the current CDC director, but I know there's a lot of frustration surrounding Fauci's power and that he wasn't elected, but he's still making all these decisions. I think one thing to note that we haven't talked about yet is how Senator Paul actually voted against this. And so I'd love to, the article that we found did not give a quote attributed to him or any reasoning as to why he voted no. I would really like to hear what his reasoning was, because I think he's usually pretty solid, especially on cases of government infringement and how the Constitution is supposed to actually direct the powers of government. And the one area in which I'd be skeptical of this is if we're just handing over more power to the bureaucracy, which we already have so much of that do we really need bureaucrats being charged with giving these decisions to the American people? Or should this be something more legislative-based? But it's legislative in the sense they're giving the power handily over.
It was overwhelmingly supported. It was 20-2 votes. So it was Rand Paul, and then I can't remember who the second no was. But leading the way were a couple Republicans. North Carolina Republican even said the modernization of the public health data and surveillance capabilities will be key to providing early warning signs of the next threat we face. And then I don't know if I read the bill and kind of it's only 14 pages long of added propositions that it would require the Senate confirmation, like you said, and it require, which I thought was the best, and I even thought Paul would look into, is that, okay, they're going to look into where the virus stemmed from, and they're going to do a long examination of the initial emergence of COVID, and especially to the Wuhan lab in China.
Yeah, I think that part is great. The quote that you just read from Senator Richard Burr, I'll read that again. The modernization of public health data and surveillance capabilities will be key in providing early warning signs of the next threat we face. This sounds a little bit like the Patriot Act to me, in the sense of like using, and I'm not making a statement on that. I don't really know enough about that, but using surveillance to get us ready for the next crisis. So I think maybe that is probably where Senator Rand Paul is having an issue with it. And he might support every other part of this bill, but he could not vote for it because of maybe the surveillance capabilities. And that does make me a little bit uncomfortable, because what kind of surveillance capabilities are we giving, and what kind of information is going to be easily accessible now to bureaucrats and the government that we're just handing over because of COVID? Are they using this to gain more power? So I think it's a nuanced win. I like some of the aspects of it, but I do think there are areas in this we should be skeptical. I know this is just the Senate Health Committee, so it's not even made its way to the Senate floor yet. But I know personally I'd like to look into this a little more. Yeah,
so I read basically the whole thing, skimmed through parts of it that kind of were a little boring, as we do as college students. But and then, as that may be, so my knowledge with at least how these will get implemented into actual law are limited. So maybe Senator Paul has good points for these. But on the most part, I thought that the surveillance were well guided with, okay, they're going to be non-specific with data that they get, and it's going to be a lot of technology-based coming from hospitals of numbers, and so nothing about patient information that I read about. And then one other part, aside from surveillance, that I really liked is that there was an understanding that mental health services during a lockdown can't be shut off, and that other aspects within society can't be shut down. So you can't just have an overall lockdown, because the harms are going to be
the unintended consequences of only considering, quote unquote, the science and like the virus itself, and not the human aspect of it, not taking into account that humans are not only physical beings but spiritual and have mental capacities too. I think that's a good thing. Yeah,
well, the remedy couldn't be worse than the fix, I think President Trump said, something along those lines.
Something like that, yeah.
And so there was a large focus on mental health services during pandemic, and stressed the importance of continuing those services and not being shut down during any type of either an epidemic or a pandemic like we just had over the past 3 years.
Well, and a lot of other types of surgeries and procedures were also put on the back burner, in which I understand there was a lot of confusion of what was actually going on at first. But I know a lot of people passed away and had serious health problems because these other surgeries weren't viewed as important because of COVID, and like that was the only thing on our minds. I believe actually a congressman from Kentucky, his wife passed away because she couldn't get the surgery, and she was pretty young, that she needed because of COVID.
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects, and that's why I really liked, at least, that there's certain aspects within this bill, or I guess not even a bill yet, but that
this proposed legislation,
that touched on the sentiments like that. So it was a really clear understanding, and it wasn't just Republicans that understood this. It was on both sides that they understood, okay, we can't do this again. It's more harmful than it's going to be helpful in this situation.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one that we'll have to keep track on when it hits the Senate floor. But I'm going to do some research into why Senator Paul said no.
Yeah, I looked up I tried to find a couple articles, but there's nothing on it so far.
Maybe he didn't make a statement yet.
No, only statements on the first one, the mask removal or potential removal on the airplanes.
Yeah, but he's usually pretty strong, so that's why I'm skeptical but optimistic, because it seems like there's some good parts of this bill. So we did have a COVID-themed episode today, but anything else you have for us, Aaron?
No, vaccine mail only happens about once every
couple episodes,
month or two. And so we thank you for listening, even if it's a repeat of some past things, but
We have something really exciting coming up. Do you want to?
Oh, I was going to say but these were good kind of motivational towards we're getting out of this. So
That's
hopefully
true.
we don't have to talk about this in the next coming months or even next year.
Yeah, and a little plug for our Faith and Freedom Conference we have coming up April 7th and 8th. If you haven't signed up for that, I believe you still can do that at faithandfreedom.com. We have keynote speaker coming April 7th, Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire. He's really popular among young conservatives especially, and he has a recent book out called Speechless, so he's going to talk about free speech and limited government. So that will be really exciting.
And we're going to have a couple prizes that we're going to be giving away in the upcoming weeks that will be leading up to the conference, and specifically the Michael Knowles talk. So be on the lookout if you're on the Grove City campus for that.
Yeah, and definitely try to make it for April 7th, Michael Knowles, keynote speaker in the evening. I know you can ask Aaron. I'm so excited. I'm probably going to fangirl in that moment. Yeah, so that will be exciting. But if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You can hit the bell. I think it's below Aaron somewhere over there on YouTube. Yeah, subscribe, hit the bell so you're notified. And we'll see you here again next week for another episode of Liberty Mail.
Thanks, y'all.
For more information on this podcast or other programs, please visit faithandfreedom.com.